Thank you to Kazimierz Usitupa, a talented musician who we'll be hearing a lot more of in the future. And hello and a very warm welcome to all of you for joining us on this special event. My name's Juliet Foster and I'll be steering you through an afternoon of discussion, contemplation and celebration. What are we celebrating? Well, we have come together to mark the 100th anniversary of the Finnish state and the 80th birthday of a brilliant statesman. Ahtisaari has devoted his career to securing peace and bringing hope to those caught in conflict. It is a difficult job, yet walking away was never once an option. President Ahtisaari's perseverance won through, and the results are visible to this day. That dedication of purpose is embodied in CMI, Crisis Management Initiative, the organization he founded that works to prevent and resolve conflicts. Now, this event is co-organized with the Elders. For those of you who don't know, the Elders are an organization made up of wise and experienced statesmen and women who share the vision of a peaceful and sustainable world. Today, some members of the Elders will be joining us to discuss their views and address certain topics that we have designed for this discussion. You too will have the opportunity to comment and put questions to our speakers using the Twitter handle Wisdom Wanted, there in the corner, Wisdom Wanted. For now, though, could you please give a very warm welcome to Tuija Talivite, who is the Executive Director of CMI.
Today's crises are bigger than people, an African leader said to me, and my heart goes out to him. We all know that feeling of despair and helplessness in the face of war and violent conflicts, despite the mechanisms and institutions we have at our disposal to deal with conflict resolution peacefully. The United Nations, the diplomatic corps, various countries, and NGOs. CMI is one of these independent, non-profit organizations specializing in peacemaking. We are the embodiment of one man's dream to make a difference in the world. Together with our founder, Martti Ahtisaari, we know that violent conflicts don't just happen. They are not bigger than people. They are brought about by the actions and non-actions of people. And by the same logic, what people start, they can also bring to an end, if that is what they choose to do. In Finland, about 99 years ago, we decided to put an end to our differences and set out on the long and rocky road for peace and prosperity together. It has been a difficult journey, full of hardship and sacrifice, where the wise leadership and determination of our women and men to build one Finland has been critical. Finland's success story is not just any story, but something to learn from and share with others. It gives us a reason to help others in their struggle for sustainable peace and a decent life. I would argue that for all of us, the best way to celebrate 100 years of independence is to join efforts in the peaceful resolution of violent conflicts, because we can. With these words, I'm delighted to welcome you to this event hosted by CMI and the Elders. Now, the Elders are an independent group of global leaders working together for peace and human rights. And we are so proud that they are with us today to mark Finland's centenary and President Ahtisaari's 80th birthday. And I cannot think of a better group of people to discuss how wise leadership and courage can tackle the problems we face today. It is now my privilege to invite the President of the Republic of Finland, Mr. Sauli Niinistö, to officially open this event.
President Ahtisaari, dear Martti, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. As a mediator, Martti Ahtisaari has seen firsthand with how little wisdom many countries have been governed. Often they have been misgoverned to the point of war. We see that today in Syria and in Yemen and in the world's youngest country, South Sudan. So, wisdom wanted. The title of this event is always timely. As we gather here to celebrate Martti's 80th birthday, we do so in terms of work. We are honoring his work for peace by discussing what we all can do for peace. Martti Ahtisaari's contributions to bringing peace in Namibia, Kosovo, and Aceh are well known. They have been recognized with the highest honor of the world can bestow upon a peacemaker, the Nobel Peace Prize. But Martti has not rested on his laurels. He is continuing to inspire people to carry the work forward at the crisis management initiative which he founded in government and international organizations and in civil society in many countries. To me, it is telling that Martti's former employer, the United Nations, under the leadership of Antonio Guterres, has made peace mediation its priority. I'm convinced that Martti's legacy will live on. Ladies and gentlemen, we all know that building lasting peace and post-conflict harmony is far from easy. I take an example from the country I know best. As you know, Finland turns 100 years this year. While we are not prone to bragging, Finns have every right to be proud of their country. The Fund for Peace repeatedly contends that Finland is the most stable country in the world. We are a vibrant democracy that respects the rights of its citizens and others. An engaged EU member state with strong transatlantic links. A country that knows how to defend itself and how to contribute to regional and international security. But this was not always so. 100 years ago, Finland was, in today's terminology, a developing country. It was also about to descend in a brief but bloody civil war. Atrocities were committed and nearly 100,000 people perished because of the war. The country was left deeply divided. However, after fighting stopped, there was enough wisdom on both sides to quickly begin the process of reconciliation. Land reform was carried out, rule of law was restored, the divisive language question between Finnish and Swedish was resolved. Political differences were settled in free and fair elections. In 20 years, the wounds had healed to the point where the United Finns managed to successfully repel Soviet aggression. The cost in human lives and territory was heavy, but Finland survived as an independent country. There are some lessons to be learned from the Finnish experience of national consolidation. In my view, the main ingredients were the wisdom and foresight of political leaders combined with a good sense of the majority of ordinary Finns. Together they built inclusive institutions that enabled the development of what I have called participatory patriotism. The Finns, working together, Also fostered an environment where every individual was encouraged to reach their full potential. This was done through universal education and equality between the sexes. The empowerment of women has been particularly important for Finland's development. The results of these choices are visible in Finland today. They are etched in our institutions and culture of equality, moderation, and compromise. I believe these are the ingredients not only for domestic but also international peace and harmony. The problem is that these principles are not readily exportable. Sound institutions and political cultures take generations to develop. They must be allowed to grow strong roots in the local soil. Only their destruction is easy. Indeed, the problem we face today is that too many seem to question the value of these principles. In many countries, democracy and human rights are rolled back. Our common international institutions are under a growing strain, and many claim that their country or its interests should prevail over those of others. This is not the way for peace and harmony, but increasing discord, even violence. We must resist these calls and make the case for moderation and compromise. We also help each and every individual to reach their full potential. Economic and political opportunities are vital. People must have a say and a positive stake in their own societies, a feeling that they are allowed to make a contribution to their own lives as well as those of others. We must put special emphasis on the young. The lack of a viable perspective in life is a fertile breeding ground for mass migration, domestic turbulence, religious fanaticism, even terrorism. We must help all the countries in the world to take better care of their young. Ladies and gentlemen, wisdom is indeed wanted in this world. I'm enough of an optimist to believe that the kind of wisdom Martti Ahtisaari has shown throughout his career will prevail. Sometimes, after all other options have been exhausted, but eventually it will prevail. Martti, as we celebrate your many achievements today, we also reaffirm our own commitment to the key principles that have guided your work, wisdom and patience coming together in an unrelenting work for peace. I wish you a happy birthday and many more fulfilling years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. President Ahtisaari, Your Excellencies. Using your words, you so nicely put it and eloquently put it. Finland is a success story that was cemented on how Finnish people came together and together brought this country of its inclusiveness and working together, hard working together towards the country that we see it today. You also mentioned youth, which is very important. At CMI, we've worked in many cases where we've seen that our biggest door opener to the most stubborn doors to open in those bunkers and tents where we've worked is the way CMI approaches different conflicts. That idea that stemmed from Finnish ideology of taking things forward, which is, let's do it your way. We're not here to impose an idea on you. We're not here to do it for you. If you have willingness for peace and you want to exchange violence for dialogue, CMI here can be your partner. And this is a message well heard. Now, as I come from Baghdad just recently, I had an opportunity of spending another week there. For the first time, I'm really hopeful for Iraq's future. For the first time, I saw that there was a movement growing where youth, which is 70% under 30 years of age in that country, want to get rid of the stubborn people of the past, the grievances of the past, and look forward. And for the first time, I saw that we had an opportunity to help that youth cement that vision into a process forward. Peace and peace working, peace mediation is not easy. This is not a thing that you can do in a year or two. Miracles really rarely happen in that field. And CMI, as a player that works under that idea of partnership, has made sure that our partners understand that we're there for the long run. We're there to bring those Finnish ideas forward, the way that unity is built, the way that grievances are forgotten in the name of going forward. And no better man can take those ideas forward. Using Martti Ahtisaari's name in many of our meetings as a door opener has opened many doors. And therefore, I'm very happy to announce that MTV is making a documentary called Martti Ahtisaari's documentary. And without further ado, I would like to present a clip of that documentary for you. Thank you very much.
And if you like that, all right, but if you prefer to be solving problems and active, then I wasn't surprised that he didn't seek a second term.
Ahtisaari combines qualities of a diplomat with a sense of mission for finding a peaceful solution for conflicts.
He can at any time go to Namibia as a citizen of that country.
They had worked out with the Americans, the Russians, a paper which gave the conditions of the withdrawal. They handed it to Milosevic, and Milosevic handed it to his foreign minister, and the foreign minister started to say, well, on point 1 and on point 2 we have this, and so Ahti simply said, hold on, we are not here to negotiate. We bring you this paper, we expect an answer either yes or no. That's it.
It was an amalgam of toughness and empathy.
his capacity to talk to the Russians with professional, disciplined protocol is quite amazing to me. He must have strong feelings somewhere in his heart that tell him that the Russians took his home.
Tämän vuoden loppuun mennessä.
In the CMI, he has a legacy institution, but it's him who is speaking. It's Martti. It's Martti on behalf of Finland.
How would my husband invite the delivery guy into the house, and it's Martti who's personally, unannounced, dropping by to deliver flowers on the occasion of the birth of my second daughter?
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the welcome that you've given to the elders and for being part of this very special event here in Helsinki today. As I think, yes, you can see on the screen behind me, my name's David Nussbaum. I'm the Chief Executive of the Elders, the Secretariat that supports the work of this remarkable group. As we've just seen in that wonderful film, we're here to honour the life and work of a remarkable man, President Martti Ahtisaari, and of course his reputation as a peacemaker and an international diplomat needs no introduction. But I'd like to say just a couple of words about the very particular contribution he makes to the elders. He brings a Finnish passion for egalitarianism and gender equality, for example. In fact, already today in the meetings we had this morning, both topics have been raised by Martti, with a little reference to Finland alongside. But as befits his international experience and perspective, he will always argue that these values do not belong to any one or many countries, but they belong to every woman, man and child on the planet. Now, the elders, like Finland, is celebrating a special birthday this year, but ours is rather more modest. We're 10 years old this year, rather than a century. And as we reflect on the past progress that's been made and on the big future challenges there are, some of which we've already had alluded to, we are inspired by all the members of the elders, but particularly by our chair, Kofi Annan. As a former Secretary General of the United Nations, he brings a unique perspective and a truly global vision. When we talk today about wisdom wanted, his is inevitably a voice to which the whole world turns. So, without further ado, it's my great honour and privilege to welcome onto the stage Mr. Kofi Annan, Chair of the Elders. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for that warm introduction. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor to be with you this afternoon. We come to Helsinki in a celebratory mood to honor Martti Ahtisaari as he turns 80, and Finland as it marks its centenary of proud independence. This is the first time the elders have collectively been in Finland. But in many ways, we feel deeply at home and familiar with your country, because Martti has always been such a consistent and compelling advocate of Finnish and Nordic values of egalitarian and social justice. If we look at the world today, it is hard to disagree that if these values were held and also applied in other countries and other regions, the scale of the challenges we face might seem less daunting. His wisdom, from climate change and migration to tackling terrorism and trying to resolve the world's most intractable conflicts, we can only make progress if we all work together, sharing burdens, assuming responsibilities for the common good. This is the essence of wise and responsible leadership, and it is, of course, what Marty Ahtisaari has always shown throughout his distinguished career. He is the only person I know who has made peace on 3 continents: Africa, in Namibia, Kosovo in Europe, and Aceh in Indonesia. Throughout his work with CMI and with the elders, he has been a constant voice for peace, progress, and persistence. When others could be tempted to succumb to fatalism, Marty has always insisted that every conflict can be resolved if the parties are seriously willing to come to an agreement. His wisdom, from which the rest of us have learned so much and gained so much inspiration, lies in the patient art of listening and in combination with robust readiness to confront those who are not ready or willing to live up to their responsibilities to make peace, hiding instead behind euphemisms and dogma. As we will hear in the following panel discussion, our world feels like it is at a critical juncture. The decisions leaders take today will resonate for generations to come. Wisdom is indeed wanted, and we are fortunate indeed to have such a shining example as President Ahtisaari to give us hope for the future. Marty and Finland, happy birthdays.
Kofi Annan, thank you so much for that. On behalf of all of us, I'd like to thank you for your words of wisdom, graciousness, generosity, and above all, inspiration, because there is so much as well that we can learn from you. So thank you there to Kofi Annan. Now, what to say about our next speaker? Well, he is a man of considerable energy and enthusiasm who, as the Brits would say, has a boy's own passion for adventure. When he's not breaking yachting records or circumnavigating the globe in balloons or even doing his bit for outer space travel, he is actively involved in humanitarian and environmental causes. He is the force behind the Virgin Earth Challenge, which offers a $25 million prize for a commercially viable design that leads to the removal of greenhouse gases from the Earth's atmosphere. In the year 2000, he was knighted by Queen Elizabeth II for his services to entrepreneurship. And according to his Wikipedia biography, he hates wearing ties and carries a pair of scissors in his pockets to remove them from unsuspecting wearers, which is why I left mine at home, so everybody else beware. Could you please give a very warm welcome to Sir Richard Branson, entrepreneur, philanthropist, and member of the Elders Advisory Council.
Thank you very much. I think I first came to Finland about 40 years ago to sign a band. I wonder whether anybody can remember a band called Wigwam? Okay, so either the music's lasted longer than my age. A bass guitarist we signed called Pekka Pokula. A fantastic guitarist. Anyway, it's good to be back. So first of all, I'd like to say a wonderful thank you to Kofi, and thanks so much to all of you for being here this afternoon. Sadly, we're in a world that has become increasingly more divided by fear, by hatred, and I can think of no better place than to be here in Finland with all of you and the elders who continue to dedicate their lives to the mission that Nelson Mandela set them, to support courage where there is fear, to foster agreement where there is conflict, and to inspire hope where there is despair. Well, Nelson Mandela, Gracia Michel, Peter Gabriel and myself started the Elders 10 years ago because we felt that there was a pressing need for morally courageous global leadership. A decade later, this is needed more than ever before. Leadership and courage are the key points here, and this applies to business as well as to politics. If anything, the last 10 years have shown me that political leadership and leadership in business are two sides of the same coin. Ethical business leaders can help shape the political agenda in partnership with government and civil society. The world is deeply grateful for the hard work of the elders over the last decade, from pioneering a global campaign on child marriage to important advocacy on issues from climate change and sustainable development to equality, to justice and to conflict resolution. They continue to inspire with their energy and their tireless commitment to stand up for the most vulnerable in this world, never losing hope, and in particular, never, ever losing their sense of humour. Well, I smiled the other day when we were in a meeting talking about the importance of the next generation, and one of the younger people stood up and said that Archbishop Tutu, is always the youngest person in the room. His laughter alone is the best possible tool for peace in this world. Convening power is one of the elders' greatest strengths. Few other groups bring together so many remarkable individuals with unique experiences and perspectives. When it comes to conflict resolution, President Ahtisaari and CMI have been the most wonderful partners. CMI's combination of foresight detail, political acumen, and diplomatic finesse helps build a more peaceful world in the characteristically understated and modest manner we've all come to know and love about President Ahtisaari. His insights have informed the elders' own engagement on these issues, from South Sudan and Myanmar to more recently developing a more humane response to the global refugee crisis. I had the honour to participate in an elders' visit to Germany in September 2016, where together with President Ahtisaari, Kofi Annan and Lakhdar Brahimi, we met the then Foreign Minister, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, now Germany's president, to discuss how to tackle the immediate situation and how to counter the long-term threats of racism, xenophobia and isolationism. It was wonderful to see the elders in action with the deep wisdom and commitment to a fairer, healthier and more peaceful world for all. I feel so fortunate to have had the chance over the last decade to listen and learn from them and sit at their feet. And I hope this evening's discussion will give hope to everyone in this room. It's all too easy to become despondent and fatalistic, but that is actually the greatest betrayal of all, of ourselves, of our children, and of our grandchildren. I remain constantly inspired by the words of our dear friend, Archbishop Desmond Tutu. We must remain prisoners of hope in our determination to create a better world for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much there to Sir Richard Branson. Now, from one great talent to another. Sometimes in life, it doesn't do you any harm to come second. Last year, Sara Aalto sang her way to the finals of the X Factor talent show, where she not only wowed the public in the United Kingdom and Finland, but she also dazzled Simon Cowell. Now, for those of you who don't watch the X Factor, he is a judge who is notoriously difficult to please, but she did it. And since then, Sara has gone from strength to strength, and having signed a major record deal with Sony Music, she's now working on releasing a first song of her new album. Now, we'll have to wait a few months before we hear it, but until then, let's sit back and enjoy Sara's version of a Judy Garland classic. Can you please welcome Sara Aalto?
Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, there's a land that I heard of once in a lullaby. Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops way above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me. Somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly. Birds fly over the rainbow. Why then, oh why can't I? Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops away above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me. Birds fly Thank you.
Thank you, that was wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, can we also show our appreciation? He's gone away, actually. It's a bit unfair. Jukka Nykänen, come on, take a bow.
Jukka Nykänen!
Come on, don't be shy. Come on. Jukka, thank you. That was absolutely fantastic. All I can say is, you were robbed. You should have come first. We would agree with that. I mean, this is a really famous song, so just tell me, why did you choose it? What does it mean to you?
For me, I think this song gives me so much strength and encouragement, because I think, you know, if bluebirds can fly, why can't I? Like, who can tell me what to do? I can do whatever I want. I can achieve whatever I want. And when I sing this song, I always go and I achieve my dreams. I go for my dreams, and that's
and you're doing it.
Yeah! And this song is a beautiful song about it.
It's fantastic. And on the subject of your dreams, you are working on your album. Now, when is it going to be released? Because you can tell there are some people out there who are desperate to buy it.
Well, you know, in this business, usually nowadays, you do a single, then you do another one, and then later on the album will come. But I've been working so hard for the last months, just writing songs in London, which is really exciting. I live there now. Wow. So, yeah, in the summer, I hope you will hear the first song.
So that's the exclusive, the summer. That's when your record is released.
The first one, the first song, yeah.
Sara, we look forward to that. Thank you so much. And
Thank
for
you
that
so
beautiful
much.
rendition of Judy Garland. Sara Alto.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, in a few moments, our debate will begin with our panel of elders. But before we kick off the discussion, I just want to tell you that you can get involved. That hashtag there, Wisdom Wanted, that's your chance to actually tweet any comments or observations or indeed questions that you wish to put to our panel. So please, get going. The Twitter facility is there. It's all yours. So let's start with this panel. And I'd like to begin by welcoming to the stage Gro Harlem Brundtland. She is the former Norwegian Prime Minister, also a former UN Special Envoy for Climate Change and Deputy Chair of the Elders. Gro Harlem Brundtland, would you please care to join me on the stage? Thank you, madam.
This one.
That's fine. And could you also please welcome Graça Machel. She is the former Education Minister of Mozambique and also renowned international advocate for the rights of women and children. She too is a member of the Elders. Graça Machel, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. Hello. Ernesto Zedillo is the former president of Mexico. He is now the director of the Center for the Study of Globalization at Yale University and a member of the Elders. Ernesto Zedillo. And finally, the one and only Alexander Stubb, who is an MP and the former Prime Minister, Foreign Minister and Finance Minister of Finland. Alexander, please join us. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, our panel, thank you so much. Also, I'd like to correct myself as well, because Gro Harlem Brundtland, you are the Deputy Chair of the Elders. Now, this panel has been divided into 3 sections. The first section is looking at conflict, specifically what are the causes and how conflict can be resolved. We also want to look at the future in terms of young people, a group of people who are often not heard, but very much seen. There were references to them, in fact, with one of our earlier speakers, and the efforts that young people in Iraq are making to change, stabilize their country. And in the third section, we want to look at leadership, More specifically, what are the qualities that make a good leader? We all have a definition of what that should be, but we know in life that sometimes you don't always get what you want. So with that in mind, let's start with the first session, which is about conflict, the causes and how we can tackle them. And it's rather timely, really, isn't it, if you take into account the backdrop. In the past 2 years, we have witnessed what can only be described as a serious decline in world peace. The evidence? You don't have to look too far. The highest number of battle deaths in 25 years, a quarter of a century. The most refugees since the end of the Second World War, along with record levels of terrorism. Well, one thing we can say about today's conflicts are that they are highly complicated, with the fault lines tapping into local, regional, and international rivalries. They, in turn, produce many different actors, all vying for their own piece of the action, their place on the stage. With all that in mind, the question I'd like to put to the panel is, what is behind the upsurge in these recent conflicts? Can we say it is down to politics and economics, or does it go beyond that?
Well, it certainly goes beyond that. When you look at the root of conflicts, you have inequality, questions between religions, the misuse of religions to discriminate against others. There are many aspects of today's world, including increasing climate change and, of course, lack of equality that drives the conflicts and that can be used and misused by leaders to stir up tension.
Grazie, Michelle.
Let me begin by the obvious. When we say conflict, it means there are different perspectives or understandings of one issue, which means differences will always exist. But there is an option of resolving the differences through dialogue, through closing the gap of inequality, for instance, for mutual understanding and accepting that differences of religion, they don't necessarily mean that we are enemies of each other. So I believe that the issue here is, why is it that instead of choosing dialogue, of choosing to work together to close the gaps, and even deliberately to try and understand the other perspective, we are witnessing more and more the option of conflict, which ends up in many cases in violent conflict. So, yes, the components are very complex, but they are man-made. And because they are man-made, men and women of our times, young and old, they have to find a different way of resolving this. It's not like it's a fact of life over which we do not have the power to change.
We do have control. So that's the point, Ernesto Zedillo. A lot of these conflicts are man-made, and we can see beyond the differences if we make an effort. But clearly some people aren't.
Well, yes. Unfortunately, we have more than one conflict happening, but you made reference to a particular one that it's in our mind, the situation in Syria. And somehow your question sort of forces us to reduce it to one cause, which is a big challenge because, as my colleagues have said, it's very complex. But if you push me against the wall, I will tell you what we are seeing is a follow-up, a consequence, a sequel of something which was a violation of international law and bypassing the fundamental multilateral institution, the United Nations, and that was the invasion of Iraq. If that hadn't happened in the way it happened, probably we wouldn't be talking about this tragedy. Because what we saw in Iraq was the semi-destruction of a country, the displacement of the dominant group at the time, putting other that decided not to reconcile, but to take revenge on the oppression. And now what we are seeing really is a proxy war of people who have taken advantage of this situation to take revenge and to sort of rebalance the power in the region. So I think if we don't recognize the facts, it will be very hard to, because if we start talking about economics or inequality, come on, Syria has nothing to do with that, the conflict we are seeing. This is a proxy war that was triggered to begin with by a violation of international law and the bypassing of the fundamental multilateral institution.
And this is the point, isn't it, Alexander, that as Ernesto said there, you had one conflict which set a very bad precedent, which was never perhaps challenged, and others have simply followed through the logic on that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I guess one of the problems with every conflict is that they have a life of their own, and conflicts are always very complex. So you can't sort of give a thesis that these are the reasons why conflicts happen. I mean, one could start the war in Iraq from the attack on the Twin Towers. One could say that it was ethically motivated or it was religiously motivated. And one could say that after that there was an attack on Iraq, which led then to various forms of action. Then you take that into the Arab Spring and you notice that suddenly there is a domino effect of conflicts happening. And then those conflicts lead to something. For instance, the asylum crisis that we've had in Europe. But there are few elements that I think would pertain to every conflict. One is the notion of human dignity. When you have a feeling that human dignity is violated, that injustice has taken place, that your freedom has been evoked in one way or another. The second one is the notion of hope. If, for instance, you're a male or a female between the ages of 20 and 30, which was a lot of times the case in the Arab Spring, whether you were in Tunisia, or whether you were in Libya, or whether you were in Egypt, you had educated well, but you saw that there was no hope for economic relevance, if you will. Then people start moving along. But to say that there's one reason for a conflict and then one conflict has led to all the other ones, I think would be simplifying the world that we live in. So what we're seeing in Libya, Burundi, or South Sudan, or Iraq are very different.
Right, but then the question has to be, how do you go about resolving these? Because as you said, Ernesto, there are some conflicts which are actually proxies. I'm sorry to have to refer back to Syria, but the classic proxy war, where you've got Saudi Arabia and Iran using another country to fight out their own differences. So how can you get the players in that to move away from their prejudice, to bring it back to the basic ingredients of human dignity?
Well, the first step is to say things as they are, and to say what we are seeing is a war that is being promoted, financed, sustained by several regional powers, and behind those regional powers there are other big powers that are being complacent about this situation, because they also think that there is power at stake for them. I think that's the first step, because if we start to look at only the details, I think we are going to get lost. And I think I am very concerned, because yesterday, I guess was yesterday, before yesterday, the president of the great power, made a speech attacking Iran. And I'm not a defender of many of the things that happen in Iran, and he spoke against terrorism. And I think that's wrong. Of course you speak against terrorism, but you don't do it in a room where probably some people are responsible for financing and sponsoring terrorism. And you don't polarize even more the region. Attacking Iran. Should go there and say, guys, you have to have an understanding. You are causing a lot of pain, a lot of destruction. You are violating human dignity, and you have to sit down and talk and see under which rules you are going to live together in peace in this region. And you don't go and attack the other side and say, you guys are right. No, you guys, a few of you have been putting a lot of money for these terrorists to do what they are doing, not only in the Middle East, but in other parts of the world. And that's a fact. Everybody knows that. Right. So why don't we say it like that?
Okay. I mean, you've actually touched on a point about the quality of leadership by referring to an inexperienced leader in the Middle East, whose name I will not mention, because I'm sure that you know who he is. But this is the point when we can actually bring in some questions from the audience. And there was one, in fact, which I saw here just now, in fact. And the question was, what would you say is the role of business in fostering positive peace? Because, as we know, money is often one of the issues that triggers conflict. Who would like to tackle that? What would you say is the role of business in fostering positive peace?
Well, let me say, happily, we now have a more mature business community, progressive voices and people who are leaders, not only thinking of their own short-term profits, but realizing that they are part of a broader world and that the future of humanity and the future of planet Earth, makes them responsible, as well as every citizen and every leader, to make their contribution to a better world. There are many such examples, and I remember when I go back to 1979, I was a young environment minister. I was invited to Davos, one of the few women in the whole audience. I was asked to speak about quality of life in the 1980s. There were only men around. The only other woman was Simone Veil of France. But the point of the issue was that why I'm saying this, all these business people from across the world, everyone concluded governments are responsible for any issue that have to do with social issues, with environmental issues, with any common responsibility issues. Our only situation is the final bottom line of our profits. So I'm telling this story because so much has happened from the 79 to 80, decade shift until 2017. Now we have business people who realize we are all in this together, and that is whether we speak in concrete conflicts or whether we are speaking about the broader global issues that ask all of us to work together, to have dialogue, and to find solutions.
Okay, and Alexander?
Just give two examples on that. One that has worked and the other one that hasn't. I mean, the one that we quite often forget that has worked quite well is the European Union and European integration. I mean, we must remember that it was founded on the ruins of World War II, and the basic idea was to have free movement of goods, services, money and people, and to have institutions controlling those with the simple aim of peace, prosperity, security, and stability. And I would argue that obviously for the better part of 70 years, it did create relative peace. So one could say that money, to a certain extent, was a driver, and the economic basis that the European integration system founded is the basis of our welfare state. That created the wealth of Europe. So that's where it worked. Then another example, I think I said it when the conflict in Ukraine broke out. And we started to talk about sanctions on Russia. And I said that money is a wonderful peace mediator. But I think there, for instance, I was wrong. I mean, it didn't happen. It hasn't led to the type of peace settlement with the Crimean Peninsula or eastern Ukraine that we expected. So again, you can't extrapolate it and say that money works every time. The final point on this, that I do think that business plays actually a big role, and we should not get into a blame game. As you, Gro Harlem, very well said, that business said it's the job of governments. No, it's not. It's the private sector that creates wealth, then the government that distributes that wealth. And I think income equality and small gaps of wealth distribution are one of the keys that government can do in this.
Sure. Quite a few questions are coming in, and we are running out of time on this particular section, but very, very briefly, I'd like to get your response to this question. Is technology a force for peace or conflict? Gro Harlem Brundtland.
Well, it certainly is for both. But technology, if you look at it, in 100 years perspective or more, it certainly has generally benefited humanity. I mean, from vaccines to prevent anything, cholera, vaccine against dangerous diseases, getting rid of smallpox. I mean, you have a number of issues that illustrate how important technology has been and how mobile phones today connect people together across every continent. It means people who are watching us, listening to us today, can be there watching us in Helsinki discussing these issues. But technology can be misused.
Of course.
It can be used for cyber attacks. It can be used to even launch nuclear weapons if we are that, in that risk zone, which I think we may be. So, we have so many examples of having to work together to control technology and to have political decisions above and beyond technological solutions.
And can I have the final response, please, from Graça Machel? Thank you.
Perhaps I could also pick up the discussion about, it's not necessarily business being involved or now. I agree with what Gro was saying. But I wanted to talk about a certain kind of industry which have been prospering like we cannot even explain. It's the arms industry and its role in fueling conflict. If you look at our governments, at least in Africa, most of them, they spend lots of money buying arms and not putting enough money for education, for health, for this. Not only that, arms are so much available in the hands of anyone. They became so cheap now that anyone can buy it. I think like what we did in the past, we should begin to question seriously, do we need the development of this industry as it is? Haven't we had, for instance, the example of landmines some time back? And that was part of the movement which tackled landmines as fueling conflict and lots of suffering to people. And there was a huge movement really, which went to prohibit the production, stockpiling, transport, commercialization, and monitoring actually who is doing what, in which extent. And we came to a point where we could control, landmines. I think we are at the point also of beginning to question the role of the arms industry in proliferation of all these conflicts we are having everywhere. We come to a situation where even countries which are sitting in the Security Council, they discuss and they say, what is the resolution to make about this and that? But at the same time, they are the ones who are selling arms to different warring parts. And then they have to discuss, well, how now are we going to pass a resolution? And they don't pass the resolution, they veto, because the economic interests, including of the arms, are at the stake in this. So I think really there is an element of, yes, we need to build the bridges, we need to go fight inequality, all the things, but what is the role of the arms industry in proliferation of conflict and actually sophistication of the kind of conflicts we are facing?
So it moves things along in the sense that it's not just the economics and politics which are actually causing these conflicts, but also as well the arms industry actually taking advantage of the situation. But I want to move things on because I've noticed that we've had a couple of questions coming through here about young people. For example, in which way could youth be more involved in the peacemaking process? There was, in fact, another question. Dear panelists, how can young people be included in building peace and strong societies? Which leads quite nicely to the next segment of our discussion, focusing on young people and what they want. More importantly, how they see the world. This is what they had to say in this short film.
Here.
Climate change, the rising level of populism in Europe, and several ongoing violent conflicts have made me worried about the current state of the world.
There are a lot of agreements about matters of global importance, but these are often only pieces of paper. How do you think global cooperation could be furthered?
How can I contribute to making the world better for future generations?
Can I live in a future where nationalism and globalism can coexist peacefully?
How can we make top-notch education available for everyone and a priority for the governments?
How can we battle environmental issues in our international society?
I'm worried about climate change and what is happening to the world.
How would we best prevent terrorism? Are there any ways to overcome it completely?
I'm worried about racism.
About?
Tolerance.
People. I believe that everyone should work together towards a better society, and that means understanding the line between responsibility and freedom.
As Edward Snowden said, the solution for bad speech isn't censorship, it's more speech.
World unity. Love.
Yeah.
Great.
Take it bow. These guys were the contributors to the film. It's actually very refreshing to hear the voices of young people. But what was your response? How did you feel? Because there was some gloom, but also some optimism as well.
The end was the very best. But I noticed, I think we are on the same page as these young people, the questions they're asking. But I noticed one that is complicated and I think central is it possible to combine nationalism with globalism? Now, nationalism you have to define first. I mean, extreme forms of nationalism, I don't think you can combine with globalism and with our common future. However, people feel a link to their own society. I think they will always do. So we need to be able to find solutions that combine this sense of where you belong originally, but that you also are a global citizen. So I believe the question is essential, and it's a question that we really think need to reflect a lot about, because it will decide our future.
You're an economics expert, Ezequiel, so what's Mr. Ezequiel, what's your take about that?
You want me to be an economist.
But don't be complicated.
But I don't want to be only an economist.
Yeah, but don't be complicated when you discuss the economics.
Yeah, no. Because one of the young persons mentioned populism. And there is this populism coming in even the biggest, more powerful country in the world. So you want to know about populism, look at my own region, Latin America. Many times, several countries in my region have been devastated by populist, nationalist governments, by so-called leaders who have claimed to represent the people, right? Of course, for them, the people is only those who support them or with whom they want to have a clientele. Well, every populist experiment in Latin America has ended in economic, human, and political tragedies. So you want to know about populism, unfortunately, you have to look at Latin America to learn a little bit from history. Now, on the question of nationalism and globalism, let me be very graphic because, again, a president has said, my country first. Well, actually, there are many presidents here, and all of us say that, right? Of course, if I am elected to be president of my country, constitutionally, I have to put the interests of my country first and foremost. But that doesn't contradict the fact that there are international institutions that work for the benefit of all, including my own country. Because there are problems that cannot be addressed by only one country. You need the collectivity. You need the action of all the countries, and that's why we have created international multilateral institutions. So I take offense when somebody says, I am president and my country goes first. Yeah, that's true, because that's too obvious, right? But that doesn't preclude that you respect the international order. Another very important head of government said something like, if you are a global citizen of the world, you are a citizen of nowhere. And again, I take offense because I feel myself as a very Mexican person, but I also feel myself as a global citizen of the world. Not because I care about my country, I'm not going to care about others. Not because I care about the Mexican people, I'm not going to feel solidarity with the people of other parts of the world. So I think that statement was also very wrong.
Okay, then. Just a couple of points, really, to put in from the tweets that I've picked up so far. One here which says, love is the hope for peace for the world. So picking up on the last remark from one of our contributors to the film. Also, education and steps that increase equality prevent conflicts all over the world. We must respect human rights. But again, themes touched upon by the contributors in that film. And what I'd like to put to you, Graça Machel, and then Alex, if you could pick up the point, it's whether we listen to our young people enough. Because the media, and I hold my hands up to that, my industry, we tend to disparage them. We project them as selfish and interested in frivolity. These guys are the complete opposite. They contradict that. Do we listen enough?
Actually, we do not only we do not listen, we do not take them as really the central part of any political, economic, or social transformation. In many countries in the world today, young people are the majority. And by definition, a democracy has to take into account the interests and the voices of those majorities. But this is not what appears to be the practice. One, look at, in some parts of the world, like in mine, look at our parliament. I mean, it's people from the 50 up, while the majority of people in those countries are under 30 and sometimes under 25. Where these young people do have space to speak out, to raise their aspirations, and for their aspirations to be taken into account. Economically, we do have, what we call the issue of jobless young people. Yes, definitely, because the way we structured our economies as well do not create the platform and spaces for young people to use their creativity, their energy, and, they are fantastic inventors. But they don't have the space in which they can exactly exercise, their right to take a stake in the economy. So it's not only not to listening to them, it's really that we are not alert to the situation that our countries are young and they have to put at the center young people and, of course, give them the opportunity to shape our nations, to shape them today, to shape them tomorrow. It's their future. It's no longer our future. Ours has been already concluded. So I think there is here...
Well, mine hasn't.
Your future?
Mine hasn't.
Please, sorry. So I think we have a fundamental issue here to say, Who are our nation?
Right. What you're referring to, basically, let's throw the mantle here to Alex. It's the antagonism between the generations. The older generation, they're clinging on to the power. They refuse to share it with the younger ones, and they are the majority population, and they're suffering because they're out of work. They're denied the opportunities that you and I took for granted. And I'm not saying you're old, by the way.
Thanks. I'll tell that to my wife
You're
as well.
actually slightly younger than me.
I was just thinking in which capacity I'm speaking here, because I'm here with 3 distinguished elders. Am I sort of a middle-ager or something? But I do have sort of 2 claims to fame, my empirical evidence that I'm going to propose. One is that I have 2 teenage children, a 15-year-old daughter and a 13-year-old son. And as things would have it, this morning I visited 2 schools. One was Espoonlahti High School and the other was Munkste's Högstadieskola, upper secondary. And because I was giving talks, it sort of forced me to reflect on things. And if I can sort of try to add 2 points on this. One was I was trying to figure out what the world was like in 1989 when I graduated. Remember, the Berlin Wall came down, the Cold War ended, East met West, Velvet Revolution, the Soviet Union collapsed, Václav Havel was out there, Nelson Mandela was freed, Fukuyama talked about the end of history. Everyone would revert into liberal democracy and market economy. And it was sort of the era of hope. And I've been privileged to live my adult life in that era, when things have gone relatively well, whether it's economic prosperity, whether it's conflict management, whether it's integration. And now I look at the kids and the year 2016, and first came Brexit, and then the election of the US President Donald Trump. And to use the word hope, you know, in this context, I think would be pushing the limits even for a politician. So you know, I mean, ouch. So what I'm trying to say is that now we've reverted from the fairly peaceful tripartite liberal democracy, market economy and globalization to a rejection of it. And populism was one part of it. It has a tendency to emerge when we get income cleavages, when we get a demagogue or a financial crisis, etc. But the second question, the key question that you posed earlier was, well, okay, how can the youth be involved in this? Now, my argument, first of all, is that I actually think that a new generation is always more privileged and smarter than the previous generation. So I don't believe in people or adults who told me when I was a kid, oh, today's youth. Well, today's youth have a world in their hands which I did not have in 1989. My children don't remember time before smartphones. My children are completely free to travel anywhere they want in the world. Their children will not go to school in a vehicle that has a driver. I will probably be soon diagnosed better by artificial intelligence than by a doctor. So the opportunities are plenty. Now, my big question to young people is that, you know, do you want to be involved? Exactly. No, do you want to have a say?
But clearly they do.
Well, that's what I like. And remember, the young people are giving their messages now on Twitter. If it was on Instagram, they'd do it as well, and Snapchat even better. So this generation is trying to influence the world in a different way. So I just posed the question to myself, are we perhaps a little bit old-fashioned in thinking that centralized democratic power is the only one who has the right to decide and legislate? I think these kids think much broader than we do, and we must understand them more than them us. And that's why I believe, this is my final point, I believe in reversed mentorship. I believe that actually kids can teach us, the older, sometimes better than we can teach them. And that's why the saying that you're never too old to learn or too young to teach, I think hits home quite well.
And it's fascinating because you've touched on a point which was raised by one of our audience here, actually, where they asked whether wisdom is compatible with youth, but clearly you're saying it is, and particularly with the reverse mentoring.
Yeah, and very quickly, I mean, I was perhaps wanted to come in on this a little bit earlier. There is a distinction between wisdom and intelligence. And I think what the elders and what CMI and what Martti Ahtisaari wants to push is wisdom. And that's reflective. And I would argue that, for instance, when it comes to peace mediation, conflict resolution, and trying to get people to get along in any kind of a situation, whether it's a classroom, a war, or a family, it has to be combined in the future of 2 things. One is emotional intelligence, the fact that you can diplomatically handle a situation and solve the conflict. Be tough on tough issues and then soft and cordial on others. And the other one, actually, which is going to help us, which Ernesto touched upon earlier, and Gro as well, is technology and artificial intelligence. I actually think that in the future we can use algorithms to solve big problems and find compromises in a fairly objective manner. And this is not sci-fi. I think it's reality.
Okay, then. Very, very briefly, because we are coming to the end of this particular section, but something which I'd like all of you to address in a short space of time. Do we need the youngsters to work side by side with the elders to resolve problems? So in other words, it's the two generations getting together. Would you be happy to work with an 18 or 19-year-old?
Absolutely. You know, we have from the beginning, in the words of Nelson Mandela, been asked to listen to young people. That was one of the messages. And so we have had work going on between elders and youngers. And I get mails from Esther from Nigeria still, one of the youngers who were invited with us to Rio Plus 20 in 2012. And so, we have really been putting emphasis on this, working with young people, listening to young people, inviting them to give their views. And I'm sure we should do even more of that. Because I think this thought that you now mentioned about the reversal mentorship, absolutely something which many of us should think about and really spend time doing.
Okay, then, so more reverse mentoring. Would you guys be happy to do that? Graça Michel, as an elder.
Absolutely. We have recognized as elders that this is something we have to do more and more. We started, but it is important for us to... It's like what I could call a certain kind of a chain of life. We are elders. We have been, we took from generations behind us. These young generations, they will take some values, some principles, some ways, the wisdom of what we have reflected. We need to pass it on to them as we are learning. So it's absolutely unquestionable for us that, yes, I would like to do, and I should say, if I had more time, I could say what I'm trying to do in my daily life, precisely connecting with young people.
But you try to do that, as do you, Ernesto Zedillo?
Well, I am blessed by having been a good part of my adult life, except for a few years where I was doing politics, to be a professor, a teacher. So I am blessed that every week, I have to be talking, listening, and of course I get very nervous every time I go there because the students happen to be teaching me a lot of things, so I have to pretend that I am at least as clever as they are.
You've been doing it very well,
right? So I can tell you this is real. This is not hypothetical. In my own case, I try to go to other places, other universities, other communities where we deal with young people. And of course, the young people should, I hope we can convince them to support a few of the causes we are committed. But just give me a second, because you asked before about this question of what should they do. And you said involvement. That's a great word. But involvement also means responsibility. I would tell to young people, yes, you have the right, absolute right to be free to speak, but you also have the responsibility to exercise those legal rights in the way in which the constitutions of most countries determine. And that is to go and participate with your vote, with your opinion. We're talking about Brexit. If the British young people had voted, Brexit would not have happened, So now they are saying, and this Richard was remembering this a few hours ago, the ones who are going to suffer Brexit are the young people. So why they didn't go to vote massively against Brexit? Now they will suffer. Is that our fault? No, they should take responsibility.
Yeah, I have a suspicion that Brexit is a conversation for another day. It is very controversial.
Responsibility.
Don't worry. We're thinking actually that when you look at the negotiations between the EU and the UK, the CMI could do some peace mediation.
I think you need to start now, actually, because we have a general election going on. It's getting very scrappy at the moment. But, we were talking about the election and Brexit. It all projects into the future, which is quite nice, because that's where I want to be, not literally, but in terms of this discussion, because I want to put the focus on new leaders, the ingredients of what makes a good leader. In other words, what do you guys expect when you look into the future? What do you expect for your new leaders? Now, my starting premise in this is to stay rooted to the present just for the moment, because I think it's fair to say that we have entered a political era where mavericks, or some mavericks, are in charge. Now, is this a one-off, a blip, or does it set the tone for the future? Will there be a point where perhaps mavericks like the Donald Trumps of this world, they will become a regular part of the political architecture? Who'd like to tackle that?
That's interesting. Well, I certainly hope not. I mean, I still am an optimist. I still think that people will learn both from Brexit and from Trump. What you don't need to do, I still believe, broad-based democracy, but it also means that we have to be speaking with all groups of people, and we have to see that that knowledge is spread, and that we listen to people, and that we argue. Because frankly, what is spread in social media, when it is hate speech, it is wrong values that should be countered by messages that are the right ones. Are we sure that everyone is doing what they can to participate in that global dialogue in a way that prepares everyone to make the right decisions on election day?
I fully agree with Gro, and if I can just make 2 points. One is, I think we need more value leadership. I think we need leaders who stand up for values. I mean, in our case, they might be human rights, fundamental rights, freedoms, liberal democracy, social market economy, human dignity, anti-racism, pro-immigration. I, for instance, think that the value leadership that Angela Merkel has shown in the past few years in tremendous crisis is exactly what has been needed in Europe. The second issue is I'm also, just like Gro, an optimist. And the best piece that I've read on populism, which is the leadership that we're seeing right now, whether it's in the form of Donald Trump or Marine Le Pen or Geert Wilders or Nigel Farage, whoever, you can pick your choice. He wrote a piece where he argued that this type of populism usually emerges, and it's a historical piece from the 1800s, when you have 5 things present. One is sudden immigratory moves. We've seen those in Europe. 2 is a discrepancy of income, rich getting richer, poor staying the same, or at least a feeling of injustice. The third one is perceived corruption, or a feeling that, Washington is corrupt, or Brussels is corrupt, or something like that. The fourth thing is a financial crisis, and obviously we had that starting 2008, 2009. And then the fifth thing that you need is a demagogue that incites all of these feelings. And that's why I think that current leadership really should stand up against some of the popular perceptions and defend the values. And I fully agree with Gro on hate speech. That is basically uncivil behavior. And that's something that I think should be contained by political leaders, business leaders, but also by media. Because if you start purporting people in a really nasty way, no matter who it is, even if it's the President of the United States, then you sort of allow for that type of speech. And when you allow for it, you've opened the floodgates, and I think the world becomes a worse place. So we need a little bit defense of the good, so to speak.
And Ernesto Zedillo, I know that you wanted to say something.
I am in agreement with what my colleague said. However, talking to the young people, and I live this frequently at my own school, students come to me and say, we come here to to learn how to be leaders. And I said, you are absolutely wrong, right? You don't go to school to be leaders. And in fact, don't abuse the word, because leaders, there have been very few. In fact, I have a short list of 5. And of course, one of them is Mandela, right? Maybe this is a semantics problem, but what I tell my students, you don't come here to be a leader or to learn. You come here to learn, period. To learn to be critical, right? Number 1. To learn how to learn, right? And more fundamentally, you must come here to learn how to serve.
Yes.
Whether you happen one day to be the head of a company, the head of a government, or the head of a school, which is great, will depend on how willing you are
So it's
to
personal
serve,
attitude.
and to serve with values. The rest is an accident.
Can I come in on this? On this issue of abuse of leaders, and we have today much more rulers than leaders. There are people who are in position of power. There are people who are making decisions which are crucial to all of us, but they're not leaders. They're ruling. And part of the problem is that we need, I think, what the Prime Minister was talking about, to go back, perhaps the elders can help on this, to go back and say what it means to have a value-based society. And in this, what is it also to be in position of power, but in a basis of certain core values which you should be guiding every decision you make, guide yourself on those values. And I don't think this is, in recent times, it looks like it has been eroded. So whoever who has been elected, whoever who has a big company, whoever, not all, some of them, simply because they are rich, they are leaders in the business. Sure. No, they are rich people, but they are not leaders. But we do have, within those who are in private sector, we have leaders, but we have other people who are simply rich people. That they have feel entitled. So I think this issue of leadership needs also to be redefined so that we clarify. And I agree completely with you. I always talk to young people when they say, we are the future leaders. I said, but you know what? Leadership is something which is recognized in you according to the way you behave, the way you serve. It's the community you serve who recognize you as a leader. It's not you who define that I am a leader. No, you might be educated. You might be, you see, you might be highly qualified, but it doesn't give you the right to believe that you are a leader. So it is also part of our responsibility, coming to Ernesto, it's part of our responsibility the way we take our young people to understand the position and the responsibilities, and even if you like, it's the historic responsibility to shape, continue what they have inherited, but to continue to shape the world that they want to live in. Okay. But it hasn't been very clear to them the distinction between exactly leadership and...
because there are some people who are very, very wealthy who feel terribly entitled because they're leaders in business. And clearly it's resonated with the audience because you've got a very stirring response from them. But what I want to do is combine 2 points in one. We have one question here. What do we want from leaders? Ethics, integrity and accountability, which then leads into a question for all of you. What is a mistake that you have done as a leader that the next generation can learn from? Because I would add to that list ethics, integrity and accountability. It's guts. The guts to admit you've got it wrong and you're willing to fess up. So taking that, what mistakes have you guys made? And you've said, yeah, it's a fair cop. I got it wrong.
My list is so long.
It's very long.
Do we have 5 hours?
No, we don't have 5 hours. We don't have 5 hours. But what's the one that really sticks out in your memory? The howler. You've obviously made quite a few mistakes, all of you, because you're struggling to answer.
I would think if I may look back at my own experience, it is that in some aspects I didn't consult enough before making a decision. Particularly when, like, I was Minister of Education, and education touches the homes of every citizen. Everyone has an opinion about education. And it's very hard when you have to make decisions which will impact not only on the people who are in school today, but will impact also in the future of the country is going to look like. So one of the mistakes was not consulting enough before making decisions. The second one, which I think it's related to what we are discussing here, is that, yes, we are talking about wisdom. And I think there are two words I would like to add to that. One, it's courage. The second one is choices. You sometimes are confronted with what is the trend. People might push you to a certain direction. But you have to be courageous enough to stand for principle, to stand for value, even if you say this is not really the most popular position, but if this is the right one, you have to have the courage to stand and do it. The second one, related also to leadership, it's exactly to make choices. And you can only make right choices if you put yourself into 1, 2, 3 scenarios. And you look at them carefully and say, in this reality, if I take this position, or that one, what is the best way of serving the common good? And then you make choices.
Sure.
So it is important in any case, for me, at least lessons I have learned, and perhaps now, it's exactly to have the courage to go sometimes against the tide if you absolutely certain. Second is before you make a decision, you choose carefully.
Right, so choice, courage, and consultation.
Exactly.
Okay,
yeah.
So to the remaining 3 members of the panel, let's turn the question around somewhat. Have there been instances in your lives where you have not consulted enough? You think about it to this day.
I was thinking when Grasha was speaking, so one reason why I find the question about mistakes difficult to answer you is not that I feel the list is so long that it's hard to even start on. It is more that my experience and my way of being a leader and working with other people has always been that I have felt we make a decision. It's never been I making a decision. Which then, if you then, several years after such a decision that is based on a cabinet, on the Central Committee of the Labour Party, or wherever I am the leader, where I consult and listen to everybody, we come to a conclusion. How can you say then, 10 years later or 20 years later, you can't say, I made a mistake. Because, in fact, if we did make a mistake, we made a mistake after having tried to analyze the situation and point in the right direction based on our values. I want to explain this because I think sometimes that kind of question is not completely regarding what leadership means if leadership is done in the way I think is the right way. Okay. And that is what Grasha said. One of the issues is courage. I have often been warned by some of the people around the table, we should be careful about this. Because listen, there are people who don't agree, there will be a noise. Well, if we think it's right, we make that decision, even if it takes some courage.
Yeah. Follow your convictions. Yeah. Ernesto, have you had time... Have you had time to think?
You are forcing me to do something that I never do, like acts of contrition.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Thank
but
you
of course I have made many mistakes. But you are thinking about what big mistake I did as president of Mexico, right?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily.
And
not
I would
necessarily
say,
as president.
and I'm going to tell you.
Okay.
Really. my first decision as president of Mexico was to recognize that my country's rule of law was extremely weak. And I started a reform by promoting independence, real independence of the judiciary, right? And I knew that this had to be a process. But advisors said, okay, you did this, it was achieved, it's only a first step. But you also have to fight a terrible economic crisis. You have committed to achieve political reform in your country. You will be hands-on on these two great topics. So let the other process, once you have taken this step, to move naturally through the political system, to the federal system. Well, I was hands-on on the economy. I was hands-on on social policy too, on political reform. But I was very stupid in believing that that first step was going to trigger a process to really strengthen rule of law in my country. In retrospect, I would have preferred sacrifice other aspects that we did during my time as president and had focused on not only judiciary reform, but every aspect of rule of law. Because today we are paying the consequences. And I feel bad, I feel guilty.
Okay. Thank you.
According to the monitor, we're over time.
Yeah,
so
we
I
are
think
over
we
time. No. You don't get away with it here. You don't get away with it. We've had everybody's confession. I don't need to confess because I'm the moderator.
Political light in front of him.
No, he doesn't.
I don't need to confess. I'm the moderator, so I'm above that.
Well, I guess the first question was linked to consulting enough. I say perhaps sometimes I was a little bit too Swedish in my political career. I consulted a little bit too much. And that sometimes led a little bit to humming and hawing and not coming to decisions quickly enough. Having said that, sometimes I made rash and quick decisions, which didn't turn out to work out at the end. But there's one mistake that I would do again, and it's the notion of trust. I believe that in politics and in life, everything is always based on trust. That you trust those close to you, you trust those far away, and even naively trust those who are your enemies. And sometimes that can be to your detriment. But I always wanted to leave politics the day I do it with a notion that I trusted someone who then perhaps did something a little bit different, and that led to a bad situation. But to be quite honest, whatever I say here on stage today, given that the Finnish media is here and I haven't given an interview to the Finnish media in a year, will be big headlines. So hold your horses, my book is coming out in September.
Which is a splendid note.
A lot of mistakes there.
It's a splendid note on which to end this discussion. But look, some key lessons coming out of that, of course. Stand by the courage of your convictions. Yes, you will make mistakes, but at the end of the day, we are all human after all. Can you please show your appreciation to our distinguished panel? Rohad and Guten, thank you. Gracias, Michelle. Ernesto Zedillo and Alexander Stubb. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Speaking for myself, I know that I have certainly learned a great deal this afternoon. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, both of you. Excellent. And we'll look out for the book. Thank you. When is it coming out?
September.
September. Okay, that's the exclusive to the Finnish media. The book will be out in September. Okay. Time, unfortunately, was our enemy there, but we do have the time, if you like, to remember why we are here. We're here to really commemorate two occasions. One, of course, is celebrating the centenary of Finland as a state in its own right. And also to mark the 80th birthday of Ahtisaari. And of course, no birthday celebration would be complete without the warm wishes and sincerest hopes of some very, very close friends.
Dear Marty, we've known each other.
The elders, and I always benefit from your great experience and your wisdom. Thank you, Marty.
President Ahtisaari, it is a great pleasure to wish you happy birthday, and I hope that you will give us the benefit of your very sane advice all the time, and will inspire us with your activities as a man of peace.
Marty, happy 80th anniversary and welcome to the club of the people who are 80 and more. This is a new experience for you. It's not for me. I've been there before you. You are most welcome. You have been a friend before you were 80, and you are going to be a friend for many, many years, I hope, after you join our club. We really feel that we are fortunate to have been working with you. I mean, I have known you already in the United Nations, but in the elders we have really come to know one another more, and I have come to appreciate you very much and see all your very effective contributions, and it's always such a great pleasure to see you and Eva. So happy birthday again, and all the best to you until we meet again.
Marty, it's wonderful to be in your country as you celebrate your 80th birthday. 80 years young, because you're such an active elder. I admire so much the seriousness with which you've taken the role of elder and brought to it such incredible wisdom. You are always knowledgeable about the countries we're talking about, but also knowledgeable about how to be very low-key and self-effacing in order to try to solve problems. Not to trumpet in an ego way yourself, but rather to immerse yourself in the country's situation and try and do for them what may be useful in trying to resolve very difficult issues and very difficult conflicts. You have an organisation that helps you, but you bring the wisdom of that to the elders' meetings. We cherish that and we're very happy about it. And I'm just so aware of how much you deserve that Nobel Peace Prize, and that you are a humble person, and you've often spoken about the fact that you were displaced yourself and you can speak to refugees and those displaced. You have such a knowledge of development as well, and yet I think of you most of all in your wise advice when we're dealing with the most difficult situations of conflict. So again, Nick and I wish both you and Eva the very best, and ad multos annos, on and on, hopefully, as an active elder.
Final words there of Mary Robinson. Matti Ahtisaari, the stage is yours.
Distinguished speakers and moderators, distinguished colleagues and dear friends. I'm deeply honored by all of you and your presence here in Helsinki and the National Theatre today. And I want to express to you my gratitude for joining us and for the many of you who have taken the trouble and time to travel so far north as Finland to celebrate with us. Thank you, Mr. President Sauli Niinistö, for your words and your contribution towards making sure this vibrant country celebrating 100 years this December continues to be a model of a fair and just society, ensuring egalitarian policies, democratic principles, and the rule of law. We Finns should all be very proud of what we have achieved during the past 100 years. By working together, we have managed to create a society that provides all girls and boys with equal opportunities, a decent education and good health care, irrespective of family background. This is an important recipe for also the future success of our country, and I want to add that it wouldn't do any harm for others as well. To my fellow elders, Kofi Annan, Graça Marcel, Gro Harlem Brundtland, Ernesto Cedillo, who has spoken here today, and to Mary Robinson, Richard Lagos, and Mrs. Hina Gilani in the audience. I'm privileged to be working with you and have a great respect for the way that you have used and continue to use your wisdom and tenacity to strive towards making this world a better place. I'm honored to have you here in my country, and I hope you get a glimpse of our Finnish society that I so often speak of. Mr. Richard Branson, thank you for your untiring engagement with us elders and your vibrant presence, wise words and contribution through your many initiatives furthering important causes in the world. My great thanks to all other Elders Advisory Council members present here today as well. I would like, of course, also like to thank Mrs. Tuija Talvitie, my CEO, and Mr. David Nussbaum, the CEO of the Elders, who together with their able teams have organized this event today. Thank you. It is a pleasure to be working with you. A month from now, I'm turning 80 years of age. If I look back at all these years, time has flown by both very rapidly, and while at the same time I realize I have had time to do quite a bit of things and experience even more. Were I to count my achievements, the greatest one would definitely be my family. Meeting my wife, Eva, in Kuopio when I was a very young man, and later, boy as a matter of fact, and later having my son Marco. Throughout my life, I have stepped outside of my comfort zone many times and found that extremely rewarding. One experience has paved the way for another. I left to Pakistan as a 20-year-old young teacher, unsure of what the future would hold for me. That experience opened the door not only to international but also Nordic cooperation, which has always been very close to my heart. Later my trail took me to Tanzania, from there to Namibia, and then to US and back to Finland, where I, after my presidency in 2000, established the non-governmental organization CMI. I will always be thankful to George Soros, whom we saw in a bit from the documentary, whose financial support I could focus on the odd jobs within the area of peacemaking and conflict resolution, for which CMI is also known for today. Now, 17 years later, in November this year, I'm giving up the position as chairman of the CMI to Mr. Alexander Stubb, who has also been speaking here today. I'm very pleased that he has accepted this position and that I'm able to continue supporting him and CMI in general in my role as advisor to CMI. Many have asked me about the principles that I follow in my work on mediation. I still do believe that all conflicts can be solved if there is enough will, but it cannot be done alone. The mediator needs to know where to take the process. He or she needs to have a good team and have the power players on his or her side. Here and now, at the end of my 8th decade of life, I want to recognize and pay tribute to all my friends. Friends from early professional career, colleagues who have become friends, friends from all walks of my life. Good relations are important and they need to be nurtured. The same goes for relations between members in a family, relations and trust between citizens and political leadership. Relations between countries in large family entities such as EU and UN. We are all more together than we are alone. Ladies and gentlemen, so thank you, dear friends, once more. Let us continue our work together for the brighter and more peaceful future. I thank you for your patience.
Thank you. You can't go. I'm afraid you have to stay. Yes, you are not allowed to leave, I'm afraid, because we have another surprise. Okay. So, would you care to be seated?
Yeah.
Just here. Just here. Just here. Excellent. What's our birthdays for except surprises? Sara Alto.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Mr. President. Happy birthday to you. Palionone avan, palionone avan, palionone Mr. President, palionone avan. Thanks, Mr. President, for all the things you've done, the battles that you've won, the way you deal with the peace we feel, and our problems by the ton. We thank you so much. Everybody, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Mr. President. Happy birthday to you.
It's wonderful, thank you. What a birthday. I hope that somebody serenades me like that when I'm 80. What can I say except, ladies and gentlemen, I think I speak on behalf of all of us in saying it's been a privilege to be in the company of such a distinguished man. It's not every day you get to meet an 80-year-old president, but also an equally distinguished group of people sharing their experiences and finding out about the values and the philosophies that have made them the men and women that they are today. To the elders, thank you so much for everything that you have given to us. May you continue giving. Thank you. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, I have one final favour to ask of you, and I promise I will never bother you again after